Hi, good morning, everybody. Today I'll be presenting to you my budget proposal for a theoretical $100 billion budget for the United States. And I organized them between these five categories, which are healthcare and welfare, education, defense, transportation, and environment. Um, I compared it to what the U.S. actually spends or has spent this year so far, and what shocked me was the one that the U.S. spent the most of its budget on is health and welfare, and they spend around 59% of the budget on that, which kind of shocked me because the U.S. always has the reputation that it doesn't have very good healthcare system because it doesn't have free healthcare or anything like that. But according to fiscal data, it spends around 59% of its budget around for stuff like healthcare, Medicare, Social Security programs, stuff like that. So I structured mine kind of to compare against that, but I changed a few things. What I think are the most important ones that the U.S. should mainly focus its budget on, say if it had 100 billion to spend, was healthcare for sure, education, and defense. Those three are very important in my opinion. Um, the other two, not saying that they're not important, transportation and environment are definitely important, but they're not as important in my opinion, and the U.S. shouldn't spend as much as they do on it. Um, but I did change some things. So for health and welfare, I decided to spend 40% or around $40 billion of the 100 billion that we got because that's definitely the most important one for its citizens. I of course I would be happy if the U.S. had free healthcare, but that would probably be hard. But I feel like if they spend a lot of their money from different agencies and spend it on healthcare, I feel like a lot of people would be happy because a lot of people think that U.S. spends a lot of money on things that are not as important or feel like it just wastes its money on certain things. Um, it depends on which one you're thinking about it, but 40% $40 billion I believe is a good big chunk, not quite 50%, but a good chunk of that money to go to healthcare. The second one I have for 25% or $25 billion is education, because according to the sources I looked at, U.S. only spends 3% of its budget on education, which I find kind of crazy. They definitely do not spend anywhere near as much as they spend on defense or healthcare or foreign affairs, anything like that. I feel like that should be a very basic one that the U.S. should definitely invest in education for its citizens and stuff like student aid or scholarships or stuff like that. That's definitely one that the U.S. should focus on, in my opinion. Um, I feel like a lot of students would agree with me on that. A lot of parents would also agree with me on that because universities or going to colleges, stuff like that, has not been cheap in the last 20 years or anything or so. Um, the third one is defense, in my opinion, because the U.S. spends around 13% of its budget on defense. I thought it would be much higher, to be honest, considering that the U.S. spends the most out of any country on earth, spends the most has the most military budget, but it's still only 13% of its, I guess, budget, 6.6 trillion that is spent this year so far. I would actually boost that up just a little bit. I would make it around 15% or 15 billion is what I'm taking it from the 100 billion that I have, because defense is definitely very important, whether it's border security, whether it's foreign security against other countries, anything like that. Navy, Air Force, Army. That's a very important thing to keep up with and keep it um, always updating and providing money for. The other two, transportation and environment, I figured those two are not as important, but in my opinion, environment is a little bit more than transportation because obviously the environment is something that we always have to take care of because if we waste it too much, global warming, stuff like that, then it's our Earth. The Earth is gonna, not be as easy to live in the future, if you say. Um, and transportation, I feel like I left that one at the least. For environment, I put 12% or $12 billion, and transportation 8 billion or 8%. And the reason I put transportation so low because the U.S. has developed a very strong car culture, and a lot of people are able to get one, two, maybe three cars for their families for a very good price. Second hand. Obviously, buying a new car with the rates and everything hasn't been the cheapest. Car prices have always gone up, but to buy a car second hand and keep it for a few years is a very realistic thing, and I feel like the U.S. does that very well. Definitely, it's better to invest because the U.S. has only 1% or sorry 2% of its budget on the transportation, like buses or trains or anything like that. But I would definitely boost it up to 8% just to help bigger cities, uh, such as Dallas or Houston or anything like that, to have a bigger public transportation system. And definitely get something that's like the equivalent of the bullet train in Japan, to go from one city to another, or like from one state to another very quickly in like 2 or 3 hours on a train. That's something that's unheard of in the U.S., but it is developing, and I would like to see more of that money implemented in transportation. Um, Otherwise, let me know what you guys think about my proposal. Let me know if you agree with it or not. Thank you.